parents, family, and friends can help that coping go along where they can be as healthy and as productive as possible. Tonight, we're here and we have one amazing expert panel that's really going to make their case, and hopefully you're going to be inspired and motivated by their conversation and all of their tips, and I know you will. Well, first, I want to give brief introductions and then allow these ladies to really explain what they do because they know best. First off, we have psychiatrist Dr. Carol Lieberman with us. Welcome, doctor.
Thank you.
We also have family counselor and addiction specialist Tennille Jones out of Charleston, South Carolina. Welcome. And we also, last but certainly not least, we have award-winning educator and mother, Ashley Johnson. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Now, before we get started, for our viewers, Dr. Lieberman, as a psychiatrist, would you please explain your journey, what got you here?
I've wanted to be a psychiatrist since I was a teenager, actually, and I read Freud's book, Interpretation of Dreams. And I decided not only to become a psychiatrist and help people in my office, but primarily to help people through the media, through giving them insights, you know, in all the media, books, and so on. And especially interested in helping children and helping families.
Nice. Wow. Thank you so much. And you're the right one for this conversation. So Dr. Tennille, Miss Tennille Jones, counselor, of course, explain to us your work and how'd you get here?
So I got here by watching Sesame Street when I was 5 years old, and I enjoyed Sesame Street because it helped the characters recognize their worth, their value, and appreciate diversity and their own individuality. And so I knew at that age that I wanted to do the work and help people recognize their worth. And so for the past 23 years, I've been working in my community doing promoting physical, spiritual, and mental wellness.
Wow, thank you so much, and looking forward to having you a part of this conversation. And Miss Johnson, of course, you're an award-winning educator out of Atlanta Metro. Will you please introduce yourself to our live viewers?
I am a wife and a mother of two handsome little 6-year-old and 3-year-old boys who keep me on my toes, Lord. I am an educator. That is something that I'm very passionate about. Although at the beginning I tried to run from it for the longest, but it had a way of, your gift will make room for you. So it had a way of finding me and making sure that I was operating in my purpose. And that is one thing that I have found to be successful for me, is to operate in your purpose and you find joy and you can keep going and you don't get burned out as much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And educators do such a very important job for our children and also for our parents. Let's kick off this conversation. You know, Dr. Lieberman, there's been so much that goes on. And when I think about it, I have to stop, sigh, and swallow and says, wow, this is Shayna. I'm an adult. I've been to school. I've experienced things, good, bad, death, a lot of tough things and a lot of good things. And that's me. And I'm still stopping and sighing. I think of the little ones, my kids, their friends, my nieces and nephews. And I think, how is it possible they're able to process it? As a psychiatrist, our children, you know, so many parents, we just assume that they don't know, they don't understand. Help us through that.
Yes, that is the biggest problem, where parents, because they have these awkward conversations that they would have to explain things, it's easier for them to just pretend that really the kids don't understand it. They're not paying attention to television. Their friends don't talk, all of these things that aren't true. But it's really because they're afraid or they don't have the words. They don't know how to talk to the kids about all these things, from COVID to the George Floyd murder to the protests, all of this. And so they prefer to, you know, a lot of parents are afraid that they're going to explain things wrong and they don't want to make their kids scared. So it's not just totally out of ignorance. It's, you know, oh, I don't want to say the wrong thing. And so what parents need to understand is that kids do know something about all these things. Unfortunately, they don't understand them, and so they pick up the wrong ideas about things, which makes the whole thing even worse. And of course, if they're going to school, or when they were going to school, other kids would tell them things, or kids who had older siblings would tell them things, and it's just really what they're picking out is a very confused and more frightening picture of what is really going on.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, and children can certainly process things after all. And I don't say this lightheartedly, but they have imaginations as well, right? The boogeyman is very real. We've all been there. And so now there's some real life elements, Miss Jones, that are just as scary. And when I think of COVID, I start off there. You know, obviously right now in the United States, a very serious illness that continues to loom, right? Even as states have opened back up, we have right now nearly 120,000 deaths in a matter of weeks. Again, that does a lot when I hear it to me, but I'm thinking to children. And then, as Dr. Lieberman just said, there are awkward moments, and as parents, we question, we doubt it, and I think there is a defense mechanism for us where we say it's best if they'll just figure it out, or whenever they approach me with it, that's when I will address it. How dangerous is it for as parents? And we have great reasons why we go along with our life, because we're working hard, we're doing these things, but how dangerous is it when we are not really confronting the elephant in the room, where we're saying, well, if it's on their mind, they're going to bring it up, right?
Right, it's actually very dangerous. I work with a lot of youth now, like young adults or young teenagers and adolescents, and so they are very depressed, which is, you know, sometimes can be surprising, and they're highly anxious about things, because a lot of times we forget that children are little people and they have feelings.
Right.
And so the easiest thing to do is to be able to create a safe space for them to talk about their feelings, about everything that's going on, whether they are afraid, whether they are anxious. So please don't ignore that your children are also having feelings. If you're an adult and you're having feelings, you've got to know that your kids are having feelings as well.
Correct. You know, Ms. Johnson, when we think of education as an educator, that's disrupted all of your students' lives, right? Where they would have this and you'd work with them about enrichment and tutoring. How do you think your students have adjusted to this new norm?
Well, we have tried to do, let's see, what is it? House party. So we're still trying to remain in constant contact with our kids, because it was a abrupt stop. Everything just came to a halt, and nobody really knew how to process it, from government to parents to anyone, let alone our kids who truly don't understand. So we've tried to remain in constant contact. Also, with our kids being in choir, they have done Zoom meetings as well. So the educators that we have been fortunate to be surrounded by have taken the extra step to include the kids and say, hey, we're still here. We know that we can't physically see you right now or hug you or anything personable, but we can still get over the phone and do a live Zoom. So we just try to remain in constant contact to let them know, hey, we're here. If you need us, you can call us and talk to us. I know you may not want to talk to your parents all the time. I get it. I was that kid myself. So now as an educator, I'm here for you. So that's what we do.
And I can't help but think, Ms. Johnson, though, those kids who are smaller, right, like your children or maybe my children are younger, obviously they're getting on a Zoom link with the assistance of an adult. For those smaller children who don't necessarily have that support, and we recently had an exclusive conversation with an award-winning speech pathologist who did share with us that there were students of hers that were not as active as they could have been because there was some concerns with the parents. Maybe some of it was the parents weren't physically available to do it. They were working, they were not available, but some, maybe they just aren't connecting the children with a speech pathologist. I find that hard to process though, because I think of if your child has been identified for speech, obviously that's something that's needed that would help this child. But she seemed to share with us, she had thoughts that there were parents not as committed to their child's education journey as some.
And that is true, because one thing is a sacrifice. So even for the sacrifice when this happened on March 19th for myself, not only am I a business owner, but I am a wife and I am also a mother of a 6-year-old and 3-year-old whose school came to a screeching halt. So not only am I worried about, okay, I got to keep my business around and make sure we can keep a roof over our head, but I also have to make sure my kids are abiding by the online ruling and the online school structure, which took a lot of people, it took us aback. It took us back. So it's one thing, you have to process what's taking place. You have to come up with the game plan. I know that, okay, in the mornings I can work from 8 to 10, but I also know I have to dedicate a couple of hours for their schooling. And then I also have to still work and then come back to, let's do some type of enrichment, whether that's going outside. My boys love to play in dirt, Lord knows. I do too. I was that young girl. So we go out and we have nature hunts in our backyard, and it's a time to get creative. So we have to, right now, we can't be stuck in a box. We have to think outside of a box in order to survive.
Yeah, so true. Dr. Lieberman, there's so much that we cannot control in life. And for those, I'm going to stereotype, unfortunately, when we say type A personalities who like to have that schedule and that plan. And I was committed to yoga at 7 p.m. and then COVID hits. I can't help but think there have been a lot of emotions that have come up as well. I did recently find out that they were saying that there's been an increase in anxiety and depression in Americans due to everything going on. Have you found that to be true?
Oh, well, people, all ages and all walks of life, we are really suffering from a number of the things. I actually call it crisis fatigue. The things that we've been mentioning that have been going one after the other after the other. It's no sooner that you can try to get used to the fact that this is a world with coronavirus in it, than all these other things came. So, and besides that, they did studies before coronavirus that showed that just being isolated creates all kinds of problems: anxiety, depression, sometimes suicidal ideation. That's in regard to kids. That's one of the things that is unfortunately a very serious consequence that we all have to look out for. Because it's one thing on top of another thing on top of another thing. It's hard enough for adults, but for kids, a lot of the kids who just don't have really a history to be able to put this in context. This is their life, and they don't know what it was like 10 years ago or 20 years ago. A lot of kids are feeling very depressed and even suicidal because they're thinking, this isn't a world I want to live in. I don't want to live in a world where I have to worry every day that I'm going to catch this disease and maybe die, or my grandmother's going to die, or, and of course, police brutality, although that's just a few bad apples, but we won't get into the politics. But still, the fact that that exists, that could happen to somebody, and the riots and the looting and the fact that now there's COVID is coming back. Or maybe hasn't left, but we're seeing more concern about it, and of course economics. The economic fallout of COVID. So it's just one thing. It's hard enough, as I was saying, for adults to kind of try to process all of this and stay on top of it. Still have hope. But for kids, it's like, this is just too much. If this is what life is like, I can't keep dealing with all of these things. So it came up about kids asking questions. A lot of kids don't feel comfortable asking questions because, first of all, if they get the message from their parents that their parents don't really want to talk about this topic, it's a taboo topic. And then also, they're scared to ask some questions, or they're scared to show that they're having these feelings. So it's really up to the parents and teachers to ask kids, to get kids to express their feelings, to talk about all these things. They can draw, they can point to emojis, they can do other kinds of arts and crafts projects where you can tell from what they've drawn, for example, just how they're feeling.
Wow. So certainly provide those outlets where they're able to communicate, because I think that's so key. I think sometimes in our minds, we're like, well, if something's wrong, my significant other's going to tell me, right? And my kid as well. But I'll say this, I think probably some of it for some kids would go by how the response from the parent may be perceived, right? So if mom seems really worried about losing her job because we're already behind in the rent, or everybody needs to make a living, the last thing perhaps a child that may be sensitive and in tune with his mom may want to do is bring extra stress on. Is that a reasonable argument?
Yes, absolutely. And that's like when parents don't tell their kids how they're really feeling. You can somewhat, you don't have to go into great detail, but you can tell your child that you're not worried or scared about something when they see that you really are, or upset about something. But, then you say, but we're all gonna, we have plans for how we're gonna fix this. We're gonna do this and that, and we all love each other, and we're gonna go through these things as a family, and we're gonna be together. So we can say reassuring things, but when a parent says something where the kids are realizing that they're not telling the truth, then that makes it even harder for the children to trust the parent that they're going to tell them what's going on in the world.
Yeah. I think this is probably a very important question for this conversation. And by the way, we're getting some great thumbs up, and we have a teacher out of Atlanta who's saying she's being well informed by all of the panelists, and thank you for the information. Dr. Lieberman, explain what depression looks like in children, because some of us know what it looks like in adults, right? We've seen the commercials for the antidepressants. Maybe most of us by now have a friend or a family member who may have been treated, and maybe they were open about that journey. But for kids, does it look different, or should I be looking for the exact same things I see in the commercials?
Well, it can look similar to that in adults. In other words, the child can look sad. The child can, sometimes for children, depression comes out as anger. It comes out as temper tantrums. It can come out by just sitting in their room and not wanting to do anything. It can come out by nightmares. That's why I was saying about having kids draw things. Sometimes kids can draw what they dreamt about, and it can be things that are really very sad. So a lot of times you have to get at this from the side. You can't just say, are you feeling depressed today?
Okay.
Some kids, depending upon the age, some kids would say, you would say sad rather than depressed. But some kids would say, yes, I'm sad. And then, can get into, well, what's making you feel sad today? You look sad. What's making you feel sad today?
I see. So just certainly do a check-in with them, and probably ask that more than once, right? I mean, I know in the rush and the hustle that we're doing that sometimes we say, well, I asked them once and I had to go to work, but it's a constant check-in. Ms. Jones, I want to ask you a question. I want to switch subjects some. There's been a lot of racial tension that has come to the front here in the United States. There are many that will argue this issue always existed, but there have been some recent incidences where that have sort of brought it to the light again. For the children watching this, and Dr. Lieberman touched on it some, we have seen lately some really, really bad examples of people in authority do fatal things to people. And I will go on record saying I don't believe that's all law enforcement officers. I've met some amazing ones, but there is no question in my mind what we have seen lately that's made high profile media, again, very, very bad examples. How do children process that? Because I've had conversations with children under the age of 10, and then I've had conversations with kids that were tweens and teenagers, and it comes out very different. And I think it's such a balancing act for parents or that village to have that conversation and that messaging, because it's not all of anyone, right? We don't want to fall in that category where you're saying all of these people are bad, because that's wrong. I mean, that to me is the root of bigotry. And when you're pinpointing a group, but again, we're looking at what we see, and children, as you know, process things different, and they're looking at visuals, and the visuals is telling them one thing.
Yes, I think that how children process will be dependent upon this, like how the family is dealing with it, the culture that exists. So everybody's not necessarily going to process process this information the same. But yes, they may see images, obviously their exposure to social media, to television. And then you also have to think about if some kids who are already playing video games that have violence and their understanding of violence. So there's so much to consider. And so when I tell people, you really want to look at your child as an individual and what they already kind of know and what they don't know before you maybe communicate with them about certain things, and ask them. Like, I think the easiest thing is to ask your children, what do you know? Tell me your understanding about what's happening, to see what they say. And then guide them based off of what they're telling you that they already believe that's happening. And so you're not, putting your own thoughts and feelings into it. But I think there is a real element of, especially for African-American Black children, to have that concern. Because, I know parents who are already talking to their young kids about just safety in general. And so in that brings a whole set of trauma that we don't even discuss, racial trauma that we haven't even talked about what it's like to be Black in America. So that's a whole nother set of things to consider. But I would tell parents to ask your children what they already understand or what they know based off of something that they've seen, and then carry the conversation on. But most importantly, I want to echo what Dr. Lieber was saying, make sure that you allow them to be able to express themselves, whether it's through art, music, poetry, whatever they like to do, play. You can use like TV shows that they like to watch to help them, kind of help them explain or allow them to explain what they're seeing going on. So there's no one size fits all. You just really have to be in tune with your child and know how to talk to them about what's going on.
Real talk for real people, you said try not to put your own feelings into your children. That's a tough task, Ms. Jones. And I say that because when I deal with friends or associates and colleagues, and I have a conversation with their children, be it young adults or teenagers or small kids, I often find that children echo what mom and dad think politically often, right? And we, all four of us sitting on here from 4 different regions, 4 different backgrounds, I would imagine to a large degree, we probably have a lot of our parents' political thinking and other things in us because we were raised that way in our experiences. Ms. Jones, how does a parent balance that? How do they not have that conversation and somehow maybe bring up a local mayor, governor, or president of the United States they don't agree with, and that doesn't come out? How is that possible?
So I think it can come out, but I would probably tie it to values. And so again, kind of going back to what I learned at Sesame Street, like what's important to you? Why does this matter? So if a parent is talking to their kids, but why does this matter? How does it affect our household? How does it affect our community? And that's why you may see that mommy's really upset or angry and I feel helpless. And I think it's okay for parents to tell kids that you don't always have the answers, but as a family, this is what we will do. And I say, if a child doesn't feel the same way, validate their feelings anyway, because as I'm working with adults as well, and whose feelings were never validated, and now they have difficulties in adulthood because they've never were able to talk about their feelings. Just something as simple as, when a kid falls down and they're crying, oh, get up, you're not hurt. Like you're not validating your child's feelings. And so they start to question whether or not what they're feeling is true. And that leads to the depression, the anxiety, like, well, I know I feel this, but my family's telling me I don't feel this way. So what am I supposed to do? So it just creates a whole long-term list of problems.
And what a great point you bring up. I think parents, and probably all of us grew up with parents in villages like that, where parents didn't think they were necessarily doing anything wrong. They thought they were making you tough, if you will, because we all can acknowledge, I think, with a psychiatrist, an educator, and a family therapist being on the show, this world can be tough, right? And I think there's always that fear and concern for parents that I want to make my child be able to withstand the ills of the world and not appear weak. And Ms. Jones, talk about that, because when I think of COVID, when I think of systemic racism, when I think of unemployment being at an all-time high for this country, that is a lot of fear that comes in all of us. And maybe there's a time where mom wants to cry and break down, or even dad, but we still have those sentiments. Like you said, you're dealing with a lot of adults who that feelings may not have been validated. They're trying to stay tough. And so so their kids see that, where if they see maybe dad or mom saying, we're going to get through this, we're tough, we're not going to cry, it's not going to bring us down. And maybe that child is watching wide-eyed and saying, okay, then I can't show that fear. I can't show that I'm very concerned about someone leaving the house and maybe not returning, because that would make me appear weak.
Right. And so if they don't talk about it, then they may hold it in or they stuff it. And if they're stuffing it, again, that depression sinks in. And then sometimes if they are exposed to, there's a culture where kids are on social media saying suicide is a thing, right? So then they may say the easiest way out to avoid all this pain is just to end my life. And so that's why it's really important, and I just want to keep emphasizing this, it's really important for people to talk about their feelings and to check in with your kids, not just once a day, but frequently throughout the day. Because that is just, if the kids can't show you how they feel, they're going to hide it. If they don't have any social support, which right now where, most people are still social distancing, they're probably not talking to their kids or their friends on computer like adults are, so they might not have that access. And if they're isolated in their room, they're isolated with their thoughts, they're isolated with their feelings, and if they're told that their thoughts and their feelings are wrong, what do they do with that? They don't know what to do with it. And so again, for them, it's easier just to end in their lives, and so they become suicidal.
I want to just talk about that, because I think that's one of those topics we should not just transition to the next question. Suicide is devastating. It's something that should be taken very serious. And I know Dr. Lieberman described the symptoms of what depression would look like in children. And let me make clear, I know you two ladies would agree, not everybody depressed becomes suicidal, right, Ms. Jones? I think that needs to be clear on the table. But I would imagine, and you please let us know, that those who have become suicidal obviously are suffering with some depression, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Yes. Ladies, if you both would simultaneously sort of answer this, when a parent sees maybe a letter or text, behavior that seems very, very out of ordinary for their child, where they are thinking suicide may be an option this child is considering, what are the steps that needs to be taken? Because I've interviewed families who've gone through this before, suicide, and there have been mixed ideas about what to do. And being a person of faith, I want to make this clear. There's nothing obviously wrong with praying. There's power in prayer. But I've known families who say, well, we instantly go into prayer and we work it out that way. And then there are others that say, well, we immediately get medical help. It varies on the spectrum. Tell us what's the right thing that should be done, Dr. Lieberman.
Well, prayer is great. And actually, the more religious, the more a family believes in that and communicates that to the child, in general, it's a more, the child feels safer and more loved and so on. So that's great. However, that's not really the first thing that you should do if you start suspecting that your child may be severely depressed or having these suicidal ideas, or is on social media and seeing that that's the cool thing that people are saying they're doing. It really is to get professional help. And people need to recognize some of these signs. I mean, first of all, some of the risk factors. Some risk factors are if there has been anyone in the family who has committed suicide. It could be a long lost uncle, but anyone in the family, that's a risk factor. Okay. Certainly if the child is feeling depressed, we talked about some of the ways that might show itself. If a child is old enough and they're taking drugs or alcohol, if they're cutting themselves, if they say things like, oh, this is just too hard, I can't do this anymore. Things that you could kind of just ignore in a conversation. Oh, they're just talking, but really it may have a deeper significance. If they have had some kind of underlying psychological problem before all these crises that we've been hit with, someone who already has some psychological problems, a child, whether it's ADHD or manic depressive illness, bipolar, or OCD, or just anxiety, any problems in the past, that makes them more vulnerable to dealing with crises that we have in the present. So the first thing to do really is you can talk, of course, talking to the child, seeing what's getting them upset and so on, but one should not hesitate. You know, if you feel it in your gut, parents have these gut reactions that are generally almost 100% true. So if you are wondering about, could my child be thinking of committing suicide? That is enough to call a professional, a psychiatrist, a psychologist, take them to the emergency room, and don't take no for an answer from the child.
I mean, some powerful information. So you're saying that is nothing to sit on, act immediately and immediately get them medical help for intervention, if that's the case.
Yes, absolutely.
Would you suggest for the parent or the family member to confront them? Because I've heard mixed things on that. What would you suggest?
Well, not confront them, but to say, you know, I've noticed that you don't seem yourself these days.
Okay.
You seem a little angry. You seem a little sad. I don't see you talking to your friends as much as you used to. You try to get them to talk to you, but if a child, if a child is really thinking about killing themselves, they're not going to tell you because they don't want you to stop them.
Okay. So that's something to keep in mind. Wow. Ms. Jones, I want to talk real talk for real people. Dr. Lieberman said to be aware if there's someone in your family that may have committed it, even if it's a cousin, an uncle. There are many, many American families that have dealt with that. There are many American families that continue to do with the trauma and the healing of suicide. As you all know, grief has many stages, and for some people it looks different, right? The grief I have will look different from Ms. Johnson's grief. If that parent has not dealt with the trauma of what happened to their brother, their sister, their aunt, their uncle, maybe their own mom and dad, would they be willing to really address, confront this illness, this issue that's now present in their own children?
I think some parents probably would be, and then I've come across some parents who, again, may find it hard, and so like I've also encountered parents who believe that they should just get over it. So again, I think the message that we're getting in this country is that depression is just something you can get over, or just why don't you just just let it go. And so I think the education about really educating the communities about mental health being real, we still have a lot of work to do there. Okay. because of the stigma that's attached to it. And so I think the more you know, then we hope, obviously we say that the more you know, the more you do. And I think that just providing that information in communities and parents seeking that information hopefully will help them do something different, recognizing the impact that person in their family who completed suicide, how that impacted the family, and how you want to keep this from happening again.
Wow. Ms. Johnson, as an award-winning educator, you've dealt with children on a spectrum that differ. I'm sure you've encountered some children that may have had some concerns at home life, maybe some emotional concerns themselves. Obviously, you've gotten it right, but how can educators be a part of the process, helping with the mental illness and emotional issues that Ms. Jones and Dr. Lieberman spoke about?
You have to be willing to listen, and you have to be open to, definitely you have to be open to listening, because these kids are reaching out to us, a lot of educators, to where personally, I know a lot about these kids' families that the parents probably wouldn't want us to know, but they felt comfortable enough to talk to us about it. And I'm not a licensed therapist or anything, but I am a woman of faith. So I try to say things in a different way and try to encourage them to be open and honest with their parents as well. Because, even if you can't verbally come out and say it, as Dr. Lieberman was saying, you can draw it. You can write a poem. And even in our after school program, you can act it out in drama. And so forth. So you give them reasons to, give them ways to show it, to display what's going on. And you just have to be definitely 100% open and honest with them, and be open and honest to listen to them as well.
Wow. Real talk for real people, Ms. Johnson. Obviously, you've known many, many parents who come to pick their children up or spoke with you about their children needing additional academic help. I can't imagine that no one has seen probably more of insight of parents' attitudes than educators and teachers. One, based off what our children may tell you or what you see when they even simply come pick them up. And I say that because there are a lot of well-intended parents that have become overly busy. And I don't say that in a compliment way. I say that as I once remember picking my son up from daycare, and I remember his classroom teacher saying, you all are really one of few parents who are not on the phone when they pick their children up. And I said, well, what do you mean? And she said it bothered her that here is the moment for someone to pick their child up who's been away from them all day, and yet they're on the phone, and some for business, some for their job. She said, but often some were friends or family they were catching up with en route with their Bluetooth on, right? I mean, many of us may be guilty of that, but she had really serious concerns that she did not think the parent was engaging with children enough. This was simply her insight as a classroom teacher at a daycare, an academy in the community. Have you seen any of that? And if so, how does that impact our children and their emotional well-being?
To me, honestly, you crush their little feelings, because for my 6-year-old and my 3-year-old, when I go and pick them up from school, I end the conversations in the car.
Okay.
Now, we'll sit out there and carry on an extended conversation in the car until my 6:30 pickup time, but at least I give them their time when I see them, because most of the times they're saying, "Mommy," and they're excited and they're ready to tell you about what's taking place. So if you shun them, then that gives them a reason to shut down as well. Because, oh, mommy may not have time to hear me. Mommy may not want to be bothered today. And I have found myself saying, hey, not today, right now, mommy has to do this. But I also try to explain it. And I'll say, hey, when you're in school and little Bobby is bothering you, don't you get frustrated sometimes and you don't want to be bothered? Well, guess what? Mommy is there right now, so let me finish my work, and I just try to be honest with them, probably a little too honest, but I'd rather them know than not to know. And that's one thing. You just have to prioritize your family, prioritize your kids, and let them know, I am here. I'm your biggest cheerleader, because if you aren't doing it for them, the world isn't doing it for them. So then they're by themselves and they're alone. And that goes to everything else, the depression, anxiety. Who can I talk to? I'm on social media. Thank God my kids don't know anything about social media. And I don't know if I will introduce it to them. Not yet. But I kind of want to protect them as well. Yeah. Although I know that it's only so much I can do, because when you go to school, you're going to hear it from little Bobby, Chelsea, or Susan, or whoever else. And then it's like, oh, well, my mommy didn't tell me this. No, let me tell you first and get ahead of the, be ahead of the game. And then you can come back and say, oh, my mommy already talked to me about that. And that's how I want to be with my kids.
So powerful. Great point. Dr. Lieberman, I have to ask this. We can't have a conversation about children's emotional well-being without really touching on the parents. And you would know this, being a psychiatrist, better than any of us. When children deal with depression, anxiety, the many, many other emotions that can come on that spectrum, do they often reflect the parents? And what I'm asking simply is, if mom and dad have suffered from depression, does that mean those kids are more likely to suffer from it as well, or no?
Well, it depends what kind of depression. It depends. Some emotions and some behaviors come from disorders that are genetically inherited, transmitted. So for example, there are some kinds of depression that do have a genetic root. So if mommy or daddy or both do have that kind of a depression, it could be transmitted to the child. But if it's just kind of what they call a situational depression, things in the environment, things that are happening, then that wouldn't necessarily be transmitted, except for the fact that if a parent is depressed, then they would show it to their children in ways that could make their child depressed, even if it's not genetic, by, like, for example, ignoring the child, or getting angry at the child, or abusing the child, or something like that. But I just want to bring up one point. We're going to be coming to probably, I know it's still sort of up in the air, but there is talk, of course, of schools opening up. And when schools open up, that is going to bring a whole new set of problems, psychological problems for the kids. because first of all, they've been separated. They haven't had socialization with other kids for all these months. And really also, a lot of kids have been deprived of their education, either because they don't have Zoom, they don't have a computer, or even kids that do. But really, all of the kids that I have been in contact with, they haven't been taking it seriously enough, even if their teachers have been giving them Zoom classes and so on, and they've been expected to turn in homework. I know of no child who has actually participated sufficiently with their school, with their class, to be where they're supposed to be at this point. And so when kids go back to school, and teacher, depending upon the school and the teacher and so on, but if they are expecting the kids to now go to the next year of work when they haven't really gotten last year's work down, that's going to cause a lot of different problems: anxiety, depression, lots of things, and that you need to find out from your child about. I'm telling parents that they should really make an effort to get their school to let their child stay back a year. Now, I know that there's all kinds of prejudice against, oh, you must be dumb, you're staying back a year. Well, that's, and then there's social pressure, they're not going to be with their friends. But really, if you're concerned about having your child not be missing for the rest of their life, this little block, this part of their education that's like a total void, I think it would be better to have them stay back a year, and for both social reasons and for educational reasons.
Yeah. Wow. And you make up a great point. And I'll add this caveat to it, Dr. Lieberman: when the kids do go back, not sure what that will look like, right? Especially now that you have those medical experts saying we are still in or coming out of the first wave. The second wave is predicted in the fall, near the time the children return. And it happens to coincide with influenza season, which the flu season takes its toll on the U.S. enough. And it's very disturbing. Now we have COVID-19 on top of that. I can't help but think that the children, and I think kids are smarter than what we give them credit for, may have some of these concerns. I've heard children 10 and 11 years old tell their parents and tell me, and chatting with them, I don't want COVID. I don't want to go back around people because I could possibly get COVID. Dr. Lieberman, let's be real. We'll talk for real people. How much am I going to learn if I'm going into the 7th grade and I have that fear looming over my head? It's like the kid who's hungry going to school. I've interviewed those kids who grew up hungry. They weren't concentrating on academics. They were concentrating on eating.
Yes, that's right. And even though kids don't generally get COVID, that's the age group but there's an inflammatory disorder that kids can get that's related to COVID. And they could be worried about their parents getting COVID. And I mean, yes, that is hanging over their head. And then again, also, if they use masks, if some schools, it's going to be different in all the different schools, but like if kids are wearing masks or staying 6 feet apart, all those kinds of things, first of all, it reminds them of this thing hanging over their head. And also it creates a distance. We know that as adults, when you're trying to talk to somebody who you haven't seen for a while, or even if, seeing them with a mask over their mouth, you can't really tell what they're thinking or feeling. And so imagine little kids who have even less of an ability for these social cues, especially when they've been at home for all these months. That's going to take an extra psychological toll on them.
Wow, and you're so true. Ms. Jones, how can a parent that's watching us right now, or a guardian, a grandmother taking care of her grandson, and he's already explained to her and expressed his concern, which you and Dr. Lieberman would say, listen to them. He's saying, I don't want to go back to school. I mean, aren't there virtual options or remote options or homeschooling? Because it's there. How does a parent deal with that? I mean, because maybe the parent's stuck. They're like, well, the school's opening back up. They're thinking it must be safe. I want you back in a class for the reasons Dr. Lieberman brought up, right? I mean, kids tend to do better in that classroom setting. Virtual remote learning homeschooling. I think it made an honest attempt. I do think that, but I think for so many children, the disruption is there. That's why so many states have waived the right or the testing for this year going into next year as well. How does a parent deal with that? How does that dad process that with that little tween that's saying, I'm not going back, Dad. I'm not going back in that building?
I would say, obviously, listen to the kid. If you have the capabilities to explore those options, some families may not. But again, there's a such thing as having healthy fear and kind of minimizing by providing them the correct information. I know there's a lot of information going on, so maybe together as a family, you sit down and you explore what could happen, what couldn't happen, how do you stay protected in the school environment. So just kind of look up the information with the kid and let them know you're afraid too if you are, but we don't want our fears to ultimately stop us from doing anything either. So we don't want to become, paralyzed by our fears, but just kind of help them move into a healthy fear. And we can do anything, even though we have an emotion. So my method, or what I try to tell people, is it's okay to have feelings, don't become those feelings. And so we do that by modeling, appropriate ways to manage those feelings. So I would just say, explore your options as a family. If you can, keep your kids in a virtual school environment and that's something that works for everybody, then that's fine. But if you cannot, maybe just look up the information that's going around and really figure out what you can do in the school setting that would be safe.
I know as a family and marital therapist, you are obviously big about coping skills, life skills for our children and adults. We're talking about kids. And this edition of Let's Talk America's Real Talk presented here on Facebook Live. Thanks for everybody watching and those that are sharing this episode. We certainly appreciate you, and share it even if you're watching this replay a week later. But Ms. Jones, one of the things we often tell our children, look people in the eye, smile, be pleasant. As Dr. Lieberman just pointed out, now we have a mask covering all of that up. You can barely see a lot of our eyes, right? We're wearing protective eye gear because there's been some data now suggesting some of COVID can enter the eyes. So many of us are walking around covered up completely, if you will. And then I'm thinking where children, kindergartners, pre-K students love to hug their teachers, love to hug, people. Hello, that's been stopped because they're like, whoa, don't go near him, don't go near her. And a part of me is like, but isn't this going against everything we teach kids with life skills to have? I mean, where are these kids going to be when they revisit a normal school life? That's not going to be this fall, obviously, because I've seen some of the guidances put out by the CDC, the school districts, and hugging is not on any of those lists. And kindergartners and pre-K students, you know this as a therapist, that's what they do. I mean, you've done a great job, and the teachers don't solicit it. They want to hug the teacher because they knew their phonics.
I think that children can be flexible. And so if we as adults stop saying we got to get back to normal and helping kind of create a new system, I think, and again, they're going to observe how we model this flexibility. So if I'm at home and my parents are, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing ever, we're never going to get through this, then what message are the kids taking in? So I think we can make a lot of things fun. There's a lot of fun elbow touches without necessarily hugging. And I think it just being creative and letting them know it's going to be okay.
Okay.
Change, and you give them examples of how things have changed. Like you, again, connect it to things that they're involved with. So if they, for example, if they have a puppy, well, remember your puppy was this big and now the puppy's this big, the dog. So just help them understand for smaller kids, just how things change, and change is not necessarily often bad or the worst thing that could happen.
Wow, great information. Ms. Ashley, educator, no one knows kids' coping skills in a classroom or outside that classroom better than teachers, right? They are a part of that process. How can teachers help children adjust, if you will, to the normal we're living in? And I think Ms. Jones had a valid point. A lot of them our children are reading out for us. If we're not doing well with this and processing this and saying, I can't wait till I can go back to a hair salon, I mean, that's making the kids think this moment must really be hideous, right? Help us out. How can teachers help with that?
I just believe in the honesty portion where, hey, I cannot hug you right now because COVID-19, and I'm a biology major. So that dirty science part comes out of me like, oh, well, this is what's taking place, and this is this, and this is that. And the kids love to hear it because they get excited. And it's like, I would love to hug you because normally I would. And they know that because that's the type of relationship we have already established.
Yes.
So it's just a matter of, you just got to remain open and honest with these kids. They respect us so much more as adults when we are open and honest with them. We can't sugarcoat stuff from them because the world is no longer like that. And we have to they'll respect us more. And I just want parents to be honest with their kids, listen to these doctors. We can't push our fears onto them because even where I was guilty of it, where my kids go outside and all the other community kids want to come over. And I'm like, no, all right, time to go in because I don't know what's taking place in your household and so forth. So I'm still in a protective mode for my own children. And it's just a matter of, okay, well, if we can't go to the beach, let's get this little sandcastle toy thing in the back and we're going to bring the beach to the house. And that's what we have done to foster that type of atmosphere in our own household. And we try to display that with the kids, like even with the hangouts and just different, new apps where you can just communicate with more than one kid. You play games with each other. You get the parents involved. Hey, parents, how are y'all? Because we don't just talk to our kids. We have a very close relationship with our parents as well. They text us a lot, and it's just one of those, we foster a relationship with our people. And they respect us for it, and we respect them for it as well.
Powerful. And I love that element of including the parents because often, and I say this, my sister just had a baby, beautiful baby boy. And so many times in our culture, in our society here in the U.S., how's the baby? The baby is wonderful and the baby is beautiful and precious. But we also have to do a check-in with the mom and the dad, right? They still exist. And that's a valid point. You're saying it is about our kids, which are so important to us, and getting through life to be productive and healthy as possible. But doing that check-in with the parents too, that's so key because I happen to think, and Dr. Lieberman and Ms. Jones can agree or disagree, but I think kids tend to function better when the household is more stable. And that's checking in with mom and dad's emotions. As we begin to wrap up, Dr. Carol Lieberman, what a great conversation, great point you've made on tonight's edition of Real Talk here, presented by Let's Talk America Radio. Right now, this conversation is for that mom and dad, that guardian who has custody of that kid listening in. They know their kid best. I think everyone on this panel could agree to that. But what, Dr. Lieberman, would be the most important thing to get their kid to cope during this very trying time, as you called it, a crisis management? You said it's a crisis coping period for every.
We're suffering crisis fatigue.
Yes, I mean, it's so real in our little ones. And when I say little, I'm talking about from 1 year old to all the way to 18, 19, or 22 years old. Obviously, they don't have the experience of us here on this panel. What would be the most important thing you would tell that guardian, that parent, even if it's that 22-year-old and mom? Of course, she's still worried and still concerned how her daughter or son is processing all of this.
Well, I would say, first of all, just to sort of, we mentioned it before, but just to kind of highlight it, remind people, the most important things would be to be honest and also to get the kids to express their questions, their feelings about whatever it is, today that they're worried about. And I actually have something that would help people. I wrote a book called Lions and Tigers and Terrorists, Oh My, How to Protect Your Child in a Time of Terror. Now, we're not having, this isn't just about terrorists per se. We're having a time of terror that is, there are a lot of things fueling today's time of terror. And what I talk about in the book, the first half is for parents and teachers, and the second half is a picture book for kids about terrorism and in each section, I give the parents and the teachers tips for what they can do, 88 ways to help your child build resilience. And then in the children's section, I give 10 ways for kids to build resilience. So for themselves. So for example, in the kids section, because that's, that's part of it too. If we can get our kids involved in making themselves more resilient. And some of the things are like basic things, like getting them to eat nutritious food, not just always, candy. Getting them to get enough hours of sleep, getting them to get enough exercise, the really basic things, but getting them to feel like they're part of this. They're making themselves more resilient to deal with what's going on in the world. And then things like, paying a lot of attention to studying in school and various things like that. And also to not watch media that is violent. That's another thing that is going to be happening, that a lot of kids who have been home have spent a lot of time playing violent video games. And when they come back to school, violent media of all sorts makes kids more aggressive. And so we have to watch that as well. There should be less of violent media in the home. And so anyhow, so there are a number of things that you can do to build resilience, to build stronger nests. Like, that's the positive way to reframe this. Yes, there's all this chaos in our world, but if we can build stronger, more supportive, warmer, cozier nests at home for our kids, and that this pushes us to do that because of the chaos in the world, then it'll turn out to be a positive thing.
Great information. Thank you for sharing. Ms. Jones, I want to turn the question on to you. You have worked with the survivors of what happened at the Emmanuel Church in Charleston, South Carolina. Your work, very commendable. Thank you for that. The anniversary was the other day. I'm sure you know that. You have dealt with patients and treating community members that experienced a lot of trauma, clearly, and you've done well with that. Who is the most important person when it comes to overcoming obstacles? Because we're living in trying times right now, and for our children, who's going to be the most important person?
I think the individual.
Okay.
Part of what I do, which I love doing, is helping people reconnect to their own worth and value, and kind of tuning out the noise of other people saying that you can't do this and you're not worth that. And so I take great joy in that work and helping people recognize that I'm a tool. They're already the experts in terms of, they already have it within them. I'm just there to help them to get it out of them. So I don't ever walk away feeling like I've done something great. They are already great, and I get the wonderful experience of being able to come in contact with people every day to tell them their worth. And I think during this time, parents, if you're, just take some deep breaths. Okay. And every day, realize your worth as a parent, realize your child's worth, and talk to your child about their worth and their place in this world. Because a lot of the times when I'm dealing with even adults, they're like, I don't know what my purpose is in this world. So connecting to that will help guide you in all of this other stuff that we have going on. So it's you all are the most important thing to yourself, to this process of the individual.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Ms. Johnson, obviously you're an educator, but you're also a community advocate, and you're a mom, right? And I say that's certainly last on the list I just said, but probably I think you would agree. And I say this, it's the most important role that I have. I believe it's a part of my purpose. It's not my entire purpose, I believe, on this earth, but I think it's a very large part of it. Right now, what would be your lasting words to the mothers that are watching us? And I say that it's not to exclude fathers, and happy Father's Day to all the dads. I was a daddy's girl myself growing up, so fathers are essential. They're critical, very much needed. Thank my dad for all that he poured into me. But I want you to give a message to moms, and I say moms for several reasons. I have interviewed so many medical doctors that have come on the show that have said, and recently talked with oncologists, who said there are women that are so busy, and men can be busy too, I'm not knocking that, but women will miss mammograms, women will miss pap smears, women will miss annual blood work to check an A1C to determine if she's made that transition from pre-diabetic to diabetic. They will miss all of that because they're saying, I got to pick up the kids. I got to take the kids to get updated on their vaccinations. I've got to pick up my spouse or partner, got to help them with everything. Then mom and dad, then my in-laws. Everyone's depending on that woman, that mom. And she misses so much of her own self-care. And of course, to the millions and millions of mothers, majority of mothers want what's best for their children. We may have disagreements on how we get there, but I do believe most mothers in their idea, in their heads, they're believing they're doing what's best for their kids. Make that plea to that mother right now who maybe in the world of COVID, in the world of the protests, in the world of the racial strife, in the world of systemic racism and sexism that may continue to go on, she's saying, I'm tired, I'm exhausted. And here's the reminder, I have a 5-year-old that doesn't care about any of that, that doesn't care. I've got furlough, so my check is half of what it used to be. They're saying, mommy, read this story. Talk to her right now.
Well, moms, as a mother myself, I have had my frustrating moments being here, trying to make sure everything is great with the kids, making sure their education is taken care of, making sure that food is cooked and the rooms are clean and so forth. But one thing that we have started with our kids is all about structure. So even in the mornings when they are up, we have our breakfast. We try our best to eat breakfast together. Does it happen all the time? No, it does not. But we're also teaching them like, hey, if I'm working, look in the freezer. Okay. We have our pancake sausage on a stick or whatever it may be, chicken sandwiches. Something to where they're also learning how to be self-sufficient. And then we're also having time to be able to do what we need to do. So we're gonna, as a mother, you're gonna have to find a balance. I know that it's easier said than done, but you have to also put yourself first and know that it's okay for you to be first. And it's okay for you to take care of mommy, because if mommy isn't together, then who can be together for your family? And that's one thing. I am a advocate for mental health because I will go and talk to somebody because I can't do this by myself. And one thing that the psychiatrist said to me was, hey, well, what has changed over your life? Nothing's changed. I'm still the same me. And then I started thinking about it. I'm married. I have 2 kids. I'm a business owner. I have this and this. And then everything just really set in. And it's like, okay, all right, so if I know that my kids need to do XYZ for schoolwork from 8 to 10, let's set that time aside for them for that time. My kids take naps every day from 12 to 2. My parents did the same thing with us. So I know from 12 to 2, I have 2 hours of time for myself. My kids go to bed at 8 o'clock on the dot, sometimes 7:45 if it's dark outside. You never know, depends. But they go to bed at 8 o'clock. And then guess who has that time from 8 to 10 or 8 to 11? I have that time to myself. Okay. And that's one thing, I'm learning to take. It's okay for us to have time for ourselves. I'm an avid book reader, but because I don't have time to pick up a book anymore, I have learned to become a fan of Audible. Audible has been a beautiful blessing in my life because I can still listen to books and still learn at the same time, whether that's we're driving from here to there, go to mommy's office, or down to Noonan to wherever to spend time with family. But I just try to show my kids like, hey, it's still normal right here. We may not be able to go around our other family members like that, but this is what's taken place. We can get on FaceTime. Everybody has iPhones in our family just about. So it's nothing to pick up a phone and say, hey, this is what's going on. So they can still have that type of communication with someone. But as a mother, take a break, take a step back, put your kids to bed early. Or if you don't have some type of schedule for your kids, start a schedule. The time is now. We have all the time to sit up here and recreate what we want our lives to look like, because that's very important for us all to be able to move forward. So take a break, Mom. It's okay. The biggest thing is to know you are great. You are wonderful. You can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. And that's one thing that I stand on as a mother. So I let that, I'm a big kid too. So it's nothing for me to be a kid with my kids as well. And that's one thing, we make it work. And when we don't have it all together, we sit back, we readjust, and we redo it, and we keep going. But we don't stop. And you can't stop either. So keep going. Take a deep breath. Also listen to Calm. If you can't sleep at night, Calm is my best friend as well. I listen to my thunderstorms and I go to sleep. And my kids are been to bed at 8. So introduce structure into your life and it will make a world of difference.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing your inspiring journey with us. And thank you for your transparency. What a great conversation here. A Real Talk presented by Let's Talk America Radio. Tonight, we tackled the elephant in the room. We're talking about kids' coping skills. It's a conversation that makes most people uncomfortable, but I think we all can agree that we all want the children in our lives, nieces, nephews, godchildren, whatever it is, your grandchildren. We want them to be as productive and healthy as possible. And that's so key. Our panel was amazing. Of course, we seek the best and the brightest here on Let's Talk America Radio. Before you leave us, viewers, if you're watching the replay or watching us live, we appreciate your time, of course. Dr. Lieberman, will you tell our viewers where they can find more information out about you and the book you mentioned?
Sure. My website is drcarole.com, which is drcarole.com. And I also have a website, terroristtherapist.com. There's information about the book and about other kinds of work that I do as well.
Nice. Excellent. Thank you for all of your input on the show tonight, making a difference. Tanel Jones, thank you so much to have you back on the program. Your insight is always welcomed, and we appreciate all that you bring to the conversation of relevancy and practicality as well. Where can our viewers find out more information about you and your work?
You can email me. My name is Tenelle, Tenelle, middle initial O, Jones 27@gmail.com. You can also go on lowcountrypastoralcounseling.org to look up some of the things I do in private practice.
Thank you so much, and continue to inspire as well. And lastly, Ms. Johnson, a newcomer to our program, thank you so much for your relevancy and speaking about being a mother and an educator. Where can our viewers from around the world find out more information about you?
You can go to our website, www.risingphoenix, RISING, Phoenix, PHOENIX.org. I am not on social media right now because I am taking a break from social media, and I have been since February. So I still have a LinkedIn page. We have Instagram, we have Facebook, and we have Twitter. I may not see it personally, but my team will. Feel free to leave a message. You can email me anytime. I'm just me. So thank you for having me.
I love it. I love it. I love that you're you. And that's amazing. I'm sure Dr. Lieberman and Ms. Jones would agree. We have to be us, right? That's, hey, as Taylor Swift, I love her music, says, it's only one of me. You've got to enjoy that. Ladies, thank you so much for bringing this conversation to life tonight. I think it's inspired so many lives. I can tell you as a moderator and host of tonight's panel, it did for me such great insight. And may all of our children, no matter where they are, and if they're not our kid or blood relation or not, may they really reach their potential and be who they're intended to be, even if they are dealing with the crisis we're living in today. Because certainly, I don't know about you ladies, but I want them to certainly be here to continue to push through the next crisis that may be next year or maybe 25 or 45 years from now. Thank you, ladies, so much for all that you do, making a difference in the lives of those all over the world. Keep it going, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Stay safe, everyone. And everyone, thanks for watching Let's Talk America Radio. Stay tuned in. We'll be back next Sunday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, with another new topic and another exclusive guest. For more information, visit LTARadio.com or follow us out there on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, and you name it, we're there. And we want to connect. And also follow our hashtag LTA Radio. That's LTA Radio. This episode is available. It will be out there forever. So certainly feel free to share it with a friend if it's on your mind. Sharing is caring, and we appreciate you. Stay safe and stay informed. Thanks, ladies.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.